Welcome to all. This is Aquí y Ahora, Here and Now in English, a podcast under the auspices of PAG.law, the Miami based legal firm with expertise and experience in venture capital throughout the hemisphere. Our host today is Juan Pablo Cappello, president and founder of PAG.law. Aquí y Ahora welcomes our next guest. Let's start from the beginning. For many first-time entrepreneurs in Latin America, their goals include two things. Number one, to get $1 million plus in investments from a Silicon Valley-based venture capital fund. And number two, to open up a bank account at Silicon Valley Bank. As director of Startup Banking Latin America, Julia Figueiredo manages Silicon Valley Bank's portfolio of technology startups and venture capital funds based in key Latin American markets. She's also a member of the team launching Silicon Valley Bank's Latin American Growth Lending Fund, a partnership designed to provide venture debt to Latin American companies. Julia joined Silicon Valley Bank in 2018 as a vice president of LATAM Startup Banking. The team perfectly suits her passion for fast-paced work environments and positively impacting people and companies in places like Mexico and Argentina, and of course her native Brazil. Julia is also one of the founding members and serves as an advisor for Latinas in Tech, a nonprofit organization that connects and empowers Latina women working in technology. Aquí y Ahora is very pleased to have Julia with us for an interesting exchange with Juan Pablo Cappello.
Julia, thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you spending a little time with us.
No, thank you. Happy to be here.
Well, it's been great. I think so many entrepreneurs in the region have heard of Silicon Valley Bank and almost aspire to become clients without really understanding what you guys do. And I'd love to, sort of talk about, you assumed this role a couple of years ago within Silicon Valley Bank, sort of focused on Latin America. A lot of people in the region have met Andy Tao for the better part of a decade, but he's been very active and committed in the region. So yeah, why don't you talk to us about, where your focus has been? How have you been spending your time the last couple of years?
Absolutely. I think, like you mentioned, some startups and investors in the region have heard of Silicon Valley Bank, but may not have the whole spectrum of what we actually do. So maybe I'll take a step back and talk a little bit about the bank and then what the job
Sure.
that Andy Tsao and I am doing. Okay.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, so SVB, to the contrary of some people that think that it's a really new bank, was founded in 1983, so almost 40 years ago. And since day one, from founders to founders. So since day one, they were trying to create a bank for technology startups and venture capital funds. So fast forward 37 years, today we have SVB Financial Group, we have Silicon Valley Bank, which banks in the US over 50% of all the venture-backed startups and 70% of all the venture capital funds. So we offer...
Wow, that's an absolutely amazing market share.
Yeah, it is. We're really proud of it. And of course, we want to do our best to keep growing it and do the same in Latin America. So everything in the commercial banking side, we do thinking about what are the best products and services that we can do for the startups and funds. So everything from the credit cards offering to FX to investments, it's all thinking about how can we optimize the startup and the venture capital experience. So also we do have SVB Capital, which is a fund, and it's a fund of funds that invests in funds like Sequoia, Excel, Bessemer, and so on, Andreessen, and also it's a direct investment fund. Right now, they're only doing Series B in the US. So that's a little bit about Silicon Valley Bank as a whole. And Andy Tsao, my manager, started flying to Latin America in 2012. Him and Greg Becker, our CEO, went to Brazil to get to know the ecosystem, the entrepreneurs. And since then, we've been flying. Well, now with COVID, unfortunately, it's more Zoom, but
Right, a lot of Zoom calls, like all of
yeah.
us.
Yes, but we are in normal times we are usually flying once a quarter to Brazil, very frequently to Mexico because of the proximity. But we today bank over 800 companies and funds, so about 700 startups and about 100 venture capital funds in the region. We started, so a story that I really like to tell is that David Bellis from Nubank opened their bank account in, I think, 2012 or 13 to receive their first round, their seed round, and they're still our clients. So we are working with companies like that, and also with today was just announced the first Mexican unicorn. I don't know if you saw it.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, so Kavak from Mexico just became the first Mexican unicorn, and I'm so excited. We also work with them and many others, Corner Shop, Logi,
Sure.
Loft, and smaller companies as well. So we provide the banking services. We are not a licensed bank in Latin America, so we provide the banking services in the US. So if they need US dollar bank accounts because they are raising money from US investors, raising money from local funds that are US dollar based funds, or expanding to the US, we can definitely work with those companies. And now, just 2 months ago, we announced our venture debt fund. So for the first time in
Oh, good. I was going to ask you. I know Open English and a number of my clients have worked with you all on venture debt. So very interested in hearing about that.
Yeah, so in the US, we've been doing venture debt for over 25 years, and we are today we have over $2 billion deployed in venture debt for startups in the US, but we were never able to do the same for Latin America. So we've been working for a few years on a solution, and
Yep.
we finally found a solution this year. Well, it started last year, but we partner with Partners for Growth, which is a debt fund here in the Bay Area where I'm based. The IDB Invest and SVB. So it's a fund, $30 million fund, just specifically for Latin American-based companies. It is. I thought your next question would be what it's $30 million is not a huge.
No. Let's start with the more basic question, because one thing, and I've referred probably 100 clients to you all over the last 10 years or 8 years since I met Andy. And one of the things I often say to clients when they're raising money is, hey, you might, especially when they're having to do, sort of interim financing rounds, I'll say to them, hey, you should at least consider venture debt as an alternative. As you know, most of our clients have holding companies either in the US or in Cayman. But a lot of the clients, venture debt is not an instrument that's particularly well known in Latin America as an alternative to traditional venture or traditional debt. So maybe you could describe a grandes rasgos, general terms, what venture debt is, how you guys think about structuring it generally, and then we can talk about, is $30 million going to be enough or not enough?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so venture debt is an instrument where I'm going to tell a little bit how it started here in the US, and I know it's a new product for
Sure.
Latin America. There are a few funds working on it right now in Latin America, but not, it's still very early on. But a loan that the company can take, and it's cheaper than equity. And it could be to bridge a round, it could be to hire more people. So if the company needs inflow of cash to and they don't want to raise from venture capital, it's it's a good alternative. Also, if the company is raising from a VC firm, let's say $10 million, but they actually need $15 million, they could complement this round with the debt and have so the founders wouldn't get diluted, and it's a cheaper money in a way.
Right. So from what I've seen, and tell me if the terms you guys are thinking for Latin America are sort of along these lines without, boxing you in. So this is me talking, not Silicon Valley Bank, not Julia talking, to be very clear. That, what I've seen is clients who've normally clients have done sort of B rounds with established venture funds that are sort of brand names of the US. There are these funds and even institutions like Silicon Valley Bank that will offer venture debt where there'll be a $2 to $10 million line is what I've seen. The interest rate there is significantly higher than traditional bank debt, but far lower than the kind of debt you'd get from a private equity firm. And then normally what I've seen is that the originator who's making that loan takes some warrants, basically gets a bit of equity in the company as part of the facility fee. And so, that's why it's called venture debt, because it's sort of this hybrid where it's high yield, it's a higher interest debt, but not, 15% money. But it's not, 3% money like traditional bank financing might be, or 4% money. And then it'll have this warrant or equity component. Is that, again, without trying to box you guys in terms in as far as the terms, is that how you guys are sort of thinking of structuring the venture debt product in Latin America?
Yes, absolutely. I think what we are thinking about is that venture debt should be thought as a growth capital. So, and it's to be used for growth, not if the company needs money desperately to save the company. If they are
right, to survive, right.
To survive, yeah, it has to be seen as growth capital. Venture debt equals growth capital. So it is optimal to a company after the company has secured permanent capital through equity from VCs. And so we, sorry, I lost the train of thought. What was the question?
So if you guys are planning on structuring it as the sort of the way I've seen it, at least, where it's not cheap debt, but it's not the real expensive kind of debt you get from sort of hard money lenders, and there is this touch of warrant coverage. So you just were making the point that the first criteria is that it's growth capital. This isn't a lifeline to save, to give the company an extra 6 months of runway before they, potentially hit a wall and fail. Yeah. So you were, I think, pointing out that it's really focused on growth capital.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah. So exactly, you framed it really well. So we are looking at companies that are not for this fund, not necessarily raise Series B, but usually they will be around the Series B growth stage. We are looking companies that already have stable revenues and growing. Generally, the pricing, like you said, it would be a little bit more expensive than regular bank loans, around 10 to 15%. Then we would have a small commitment fee and stock warrants, and we could do it line of credit, or wait, you're gonna have to edit this out.
Oh, you could right. You could do a line of credit or a revolver, or you could make it a straight up loan. I've seen you guys structure it. At least the clients of ours who've worked with you all on this are people who like the flexibility of the line of credit, because that allows them to draw down, pay back, draw down, etc. And I can tell you that from my perspective, it's such an interesting product because, as you said, it allows money to come into the company, but is much less dilutive than traditional equity, right? And it's funny because I've even pointed out sometimes to founders where I've said, because founders always want to get the best deal possible in terms of the interest rate, and I'm always like, think about it. Even if you pay 20% on this money, which the venture debt's a lot lower interest than that, but even if you pay 20%, if you're expecting that the company is going to be doubling or tripling its valuation in the next 2 years, that you're almost paying 100% or 200% on the equity that you're bringing in. So if you could bring in debt, and you figure that the blended rate with the warrants and everything is 20%, it's literally 10 times cheaper money than bringing in equity if the company's as successful as you think it's going to be. So, I think it's a super exciting product. Of those $30 million, obviously Brazil and Mexico are the biggest markets in Latin America. How do you think that money is likely to get allocated? Is there going to be anything left for a little country like mine, Chile? Or are you guys going to focus mainly on Brazil and Mexico, at least initially?
Yes. So, like I said, it's $30 million, but we can co-invest with PFG and IDB. So actually,
that's cool.
So the pool of money is much more than 30 million, because PFG is a $400 million fund, and IDB
they got a little money. Yep.
They have a little money. So we will do anywhere between $1 to $15 million. Our sweet spot would be around $3 to $5 million. Right. So it is a Latin American fund, and we are talking to many companies in Chile, in Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, Colombia. Of course, I think Brazil and Mexico are the biggest markets, and where the companies are more mature and growing. So in 2 months, I talked to 60 companies already.
Wow. That's a lot of Zoom calls. Well, good thing you were able to do that by Zoom and not having to get on a plane. That's amazing.
I love traveling, so I do miss that part. But yes, it would be impossible to go visit all 60 clients. So we've been getting a lot of inbound, and hopefully we can do Chile and Colombia and all those countries. But right now we have some term sheets already. Hopefully we can announce some of the deals, but they're coming from the most suspicious countries.
Right. Yeah. The famous suspects. So the venture debt product tends to be for these high growth companies. As I said, at least in my experience, companies who've done sort of B rounds. And this is just almost, I view the venture debt almost like it's a cherry on top in terms of additional capital. As you mentioned, you guys have worked with over 800 venture-backed clients from Latin America, or technology-enabled clients from Latin America. Let's go down sort of the food chain a little bit, because we've worked, to give you an idea, over the last 5 years with over 600 tech-enabled clients, mainly from Latin America. And a lot of those clients, as I say, they're one of their dreams is to get an investment from a Silicon Valley fund. One of their other sort of bucket list items is to have an account at Silicon Valley Bank, which I always find, it's always cute that that's become like, one of those tick marks, that entrepreneurs sort of, want to sort of that acknowledges their success. So what are sort of the criteria that you guys use in terms of opening new banking relationships with, smaller uh, uh, tech-enabled clients from Latin America? Do they need a U.S. holding company? Do they need to have raised money in the U.S. from investors? Um, why don't we talk a little bit about, where's your bar? Where's your threshold? Understanding that, of course, there's always exceptions, but what are you all sort of looking for as you open up new initial banking relationships?
Thank you. Yes, great question. I think so. Most of the clients that we work with, they are flipping their operations to either a Delaware, Cayman, BVI holding company that owns the operating company in Latin America.
Can I just point out that, just so you know, next week I'm going to be publishing an article because, as you may know, Cayman is now on the EU blacklist. And so, most Brazilian founders are using Cayman as a holding company, and we're beginning to see a little, as I write in the article, that it may be that the Cayman LLC sandwich has become stale, or at least gotten a little soggy in the last couple of months. So we're going to be publishing an article on that. But
I'd be really interested to read it, because like you said, most of the clients that have in Brazil specifically that have raised Series B, they add the Cayman on top of the Delaware. LLC. So yeah, that would be interesting.
Well, we actually came up with that structure because,
really?
and
I didn't know.
I talk about it in the article, but it was about 10 years ago. There was it was an Argentine company that was getting investment from a US accelerator, and it only got $12,000 investment. The US accelerator made it create a US Delaware LLC as a holding company. 2 months later, the company gets sold for for $2 million. And the Argentine founder, who had never been to the US and didn't even have a US visa to travel to the US, you can only imagine how surprised he was when I told him that he and his 5 angel investors were going to have to pay $600,000 in US taxes.
Wow.
Because they had set up a US holding company for no good reason other than to get $12,500 of investment from this US accelerator. And so what happened was, I used that as an excuse. Kasek was investing into one of my other clients like a month later, and I basically just cajoled Kasek to let us put the holding company in Cayman. And Kasek, who's very founder friendly, sort of agreed. They didn't love the idea, but they agreed. And then before I knew it, NXTP had agreed to the structure. And then, it just began becoming, much more popular. And so today, in our experience, about 25% of Latin founders will use Cayman over Delaware. And then in Brazil, it's about 50-50. About half of the founders we work with. And in Brazil, we've worked with Jim Pass and 99 and a bunch of the big companies, and then lots and lots of smaller companies. And it's very interesting how in Brazil, Cayman's even more popular than Delaware almost. So that's a little history of the Cayman LLC sandwich. But I think we may start seeing the Bermuda LLC sandwich, or even the Canada LLC sandwich. I think those are going to be the likely alternatives. Or hopefully Cayman gets off the list on the EU list. But anyway, I'll share that article. That can be a conversation for another day.
That would be great. Yeah, you mentioned Canada. I've seen a lot of the Mexican companies with a Canadian structure instead of Cayman.
Yeah, exactly. And that's also because of NAFTA. There's a trading relationship between U.S., Canada, and so let's talk about. So we were back talking about the sort of requirements or filters that you guys use. So one thing you were saying was a holding company in the U.S. or in Cayman or in some other jurisdiction you're comfortable with. What are the other criteria that you guys look for in terms of opening new banking relationships?
Yeah, like you said, there are some exceptions to the rule, but usually we would like to work with companies that are raising at least $1 million. There are in the growth stage. They're past the angel and the start and the slide PowerPoint presentation phase, and they're growing. And if they are raising money from VCs we know well, so Monash, Kazakh, Redpoint, Canary,
Right.
OBP, they are the stamp of approval for those clients. Yeah, so I think and technology, obviously, all they have to be a
Right.
tech company. And within the tech spectrum, we just don't work right now with blockchain and crypto.
I know that well. I've had quite a number of clients who, and I've told them, and
Frustrated.
it's so funny because it's almost like they think they're going to trick you.
Yes.
And I'm like, listen, I'm not making the introduction. Like I normally, reach out to Andy directly or whoever. But sometimes I'll be like, no, if you want to reach out to them, good luck. But I'm not getting in the middle of that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Maybe they can trick me, but they can't trick compliance.
It
No,
is
but
funny. It's
I had
yeah,
a client. The company was great. I just said we can't.
yeah.
And then the next email came with a different business description, and I'm like, it's still crypto, so you can do it.
Right. I always tell them, hey, be super successful like Coinbase, and I'm sure they'll happily take you as a client. But but there's
Yeah.
there's 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 risk there. So let's talk a little bit about how you guys look at the region. I mean, one thing that's very interesting, and I wish I could give you guys all the credit, is when I met Andy in 2012, 2013. I met him at I think the first time at one of the Punta Tech events. Um, the ecosystem in Latin America, the Tecno Latino, was about 5 to 10% as large as it is today by dollars invested. So it was about $300 million, and last year at least, the Tecno Latino was about $4.3 billion of money invested. So I mean, the growth has just been extraordinary the last 8-9 years, and I'll give Silicon Valley Bank a little bit of credit for that, as well as all the people you mentioned, Monashis, Kasek, all these people, Endeavor, people who've been there for a long time, really getting things going. What's your view? Do you guys have any view in terms of once we get out of this odd period with the quarantine and COVID? Do you guys look at Latin America as a region where we're likely to go from $4 billion invested to 5 to 7 to 10 billion? Or do you think, we're getting to a place where we're sort of reaching a glass ceiling? The reason I ask is it's interesting because sometimes I'm like, wow, there's been so much growth, it has to slow down. But then there's people who will say to me, well, just look at Southeast Asia, not China. And, there you have 20, $30 billion a year being invested in those economies. And so it makes, the amount of money going into Latin America still look like peanuts. I mean, do you have any view in terms of, the big picture for the
Yeah.
Tecno Latino?
Yeah, well, in my opinion, I think this is just the beginning. So, like you said,
Eso.
since 2016, we've been doubling in tech
It's
investment.
incredible.
I think the first half of the year, through some LAVCA numbers, it slowed down, but it slowed down everywhere. But we are
Right.
also already seeing really big rounds on the second half of the year.
Amazing.
I wouldn't bet my money that we're gonna hit the $5 million this year again, but I think this is just the beginning. Like I said, the first unicorn in Mexico was just
Right.
announced. We have amazing stories like Nubank and 99 and Rappi and all those companies doing great things. But it's a region that still has a lot to be improved with
Right.
technology. if you think of fintech, if you think of logistics, healthcare, there's so much that can be improved. So I think there's a phrase that somebody said that adversity drives innovation, and
Right.
with innovation, more US funds are gonna, and Silicon Valley funds are gonna be looking in the region, like Andreessen, Sequoia, SoftBank with their
Oh,
$5
it's
billion
incredible.
fund. Yeah, it was crazy because I joined the bank 2 years ago, and then just um, the first 6 months we would see checks, $20 million checks, and we'd be so excited because it was so much money. And now we're getting, like, a year and a half later, we're seeing $500 million checks,
Right.
$150 million checks. So I think the entrepreneurs in Brazil, in Latin America, are very resilient, are very creative. They're solving big problems and huge problems. And I think the mindset too, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm from Brazil. So when I was in Brazil, I left in 2012, but a startup wanted to be the biggest in Brazil, and now they already start with a mindset of, no, we're going to be the biggest in Brazil, then LATAM, then the world. So there's so much that can be done and expanded, that I think LATAM is the next APAC, Southeast Asia, or I don't know. I think maybe in 5 years will be $20 million or even less.
Right. Yeah, no, it's really fantastic. Especially, I was a partner in Patagon. So, we sold that company in 2000 for 700 million or 750 million transaction value. And it was, just humongous. And what's so interesting for me is from 2000 to 2010, I mean, every year looking at LAVCA's numbers, the Tecno Latino was between 150 to 300 million dollars, and it didn't really go anywhere. It was, and every year there was, I remember when Derremate got bought by Mercado Libre for $30 million, and it seemed like a lot of money, especially because, if the whole Tecno Latino that year was $200 million, here was one transaction that represented 15% of the market, and everyone talked about it. But again, it was like 10 years of, just not any growth. I mean, it was nice. There were things going on. Endeavor was there. There were some funds, but it was just very linear kind of growth. And you'd grow a couple of years and you'd go down. And you'd grow a couple of years and you'd go down. And yeah, as you said, I mean, you started, a year or two after, you just began getting this explosive growth. And I do really think, I mean, when you see Mercado Libre as the most highly valued company in the whole region, I mean, it really shows. And especially knowing that still today, for the middle class and lower middle class and poor people in our countries, life hasn't changed nearly enough. And it's
Yeah.
really technology can be the solution. Even at Patagon, our goal, I mean, I got involved in Patagon because, I'm from Chile, and my grandmother, who didn't have a lot of money, she would get her pension check every 2 weeks. And there was only one bank in all of Chile that would take her as a client. And of course, there was no direct deposit. So we'd get her check, we'd have to wait 2 to 3 hours in a line for her to deposit the check. And that was, something we did every 2 weeks. And I just sort
That's
of always thought,
unheard of. Yeah.
right. I mean, it's crazy. When you think of just the inefficiency and just, how dumb that is, right? And to think that, that was, I'm 53. So that was, 45 years ago. And I mean, even today, I think somebody in my grandmother's position, things are a little better, but not nearly better enough. So I agree with you. I mean, I just see the opportunity in Latin America as so huge, and I'm just really excited to see what happens and what people like you do to help these entrepreneurs be successful. So do you guys at Silicon Valley Bank, I mean, you obviously, you take on clients fairly early stage, as you say, when they're leaving their home country, when they've raised, sort of over $1 million. You offer them, I guess at that stage, basic banking services. You talked about, you have your venture, sort of fund of funds kind of investing. You have the venture debt. Do you guys offer, programs of capacitación, education programs? What kind of outreach are you doing in the region? And are there any other initiatives, female investors in LATAM? I know you're involved in an organization. Are you guys, are there other things we have, 5-10 minutes left. Are there other sort of initiatives that you want to talk about that maybe I don't know about, or do you want to plug a little bit?
Yeah, I think the advantage of being connected to SVB and being a client is not the banking, right? I think banking is commoditized, and
Right.
clients could bank anywhere. But we invest all our marketing dollars, all our time to create events and networking opportunities. And we don't right now have a program like an education program, but we do have a series of webinars that we do to talk about different subjects. When we can travel, we organize these events live. So I don't know if you know, but last year we took a delegation of 20 Silicon Valley investors to Mexico. We did Mexico City and Guadalajara to show them the ecosystem. We showcased the startups, the funds, the whole ecosystem, and there were a lot of deals generated by that trip. And we want to keep doing those things, those missions and events, and being a thought leader in the industry. So that's where we are strong. Me personally, I'm very involved with women in investing, in Latinas in Tech, which was organization I was one of the first members that started here in Silicon Valley to help Latina women working in technology. It's different now because I'm not in Brazil anymore, but when I moved to the US, I didn't know anybody, and it is hard for a Latina woman to find job in technology and to grow. So this support system was so important, and it started with 5 women, and now we're over 11,000.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Talk about explosive growth. It was funny when you said 5, I was like, okay, so now I'm going to hear 100. And when you said 11, I was like, okay, 1,100. No, that's unbelievable. That is absolutely amazing. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah, and the companies here in Silicon Valley and in the US are just seeing how diversity is good for business. Diversity brings the diversity of gender and thoughts and races and culture. It brings different views for the company, and many corporations are realizing that and investing on that. So now we have Google, Comcast, Facebook as sponsors.
Right.
So yeah, I'm really interested in that and helping the women in Latin America get better positions as either partners at firms or executive roles at startups and corporations.
Well, half the partners at our firm are Latinas, so we're very diverse.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Well, yeah, no, it definitely. And then have you thought, and this is my last question, I don't want to, get controversial, but, one thing I do think about this issue of diversity in tech, particularly in Latin America, is, what can we do to not only get more women involved, but also more people of color, and particularly indigenous people? Because, the reality is, especially 10 years ago, when you went to tech conferences in LATAM, we were all Latin, but, there weren't a lot of mestizos or people of color at those conferences. And, one of the things I've been really focused on the last 3 or 4 years is how can I mentor those sort of non-traditional entrepreneurs and help them, accomplish whatever their definition of success is. Have you thought about that? Obviously, you've done a huge amount with Latinas, and maybe that's enough. But have you thought a little bit more about how to reach out to those people of color?
Yes, and I think, and I'm very passionate about education and ed tech. I think education is the single most important thing to have more people of color, women in technology, because I was born in Brazil and I was very fortunate to have a really good education, but I never knew I could work in technology or I could be a software developer. I was like, oh, I'm going to do marketing or business administration or, something, be a lawyer.
Something more traditional.
Yeah, something more traditional. And I feel like there are companies already starting to change that and trying to go to schools and make coding fun and going to poor communities and so there are two really interesting companies in Brazil. Maybe you've heard of them, Tribe and Resilia, that they are working. Sure. Yeah, they are working with very poor communities that they're maybe finishing high school and they teach them for free, and then to develop and to become a software developer. And then when they get a job and they are placed at really cool jobs, like they're partnering with companies like Stone, Nubank to place those people that maybe would have not had an opportunity in life to work at a company like that. So I think we need more of that.
Absolutely. So, hey, you've been super generous with your time. I've really always admired Silicon Valley Bank for what it's built. Certainly appreciated, Andy's friendship and leadership in the region and really helping accelerate this trend of growth for Latin entrepreneurs. One last question before we wrap up. What advice do you have for the hinchas, the supporters of the Tecno Latino, here and now in these sort of difficult times in terms of keeping up their optimism and their fortitude? What are you telling the entrepreneurs that, not all of them businesses are doing amazing. Obviously, some of their businesses are doing amazing, but there's other entrepreneurs who are struggling. What are you saying to them in terms of words of wisdom, optimism, to keep them energetic and enthused?
Yeah. Oh, that's hard. A lot of my clients are doing really well, and a lot of them are not doing really well, and that's always hard. But I think this is a new, I don't like saying this expression, the new normal that we are now getting used to. Sure. And then we're gonna have to adapt and evolve. And again, diversity drives innovation, and maybe these companies that are suffering now will have to rethink of business models and maybe making their payroll smaller. Like they're gonna have to have creative ideas to survive this what we're going through now. And there are so many cycles in the economy, right. And we've seen so many especially in Latin America, when we think things are going well, and then something happens. And like, I think Latin American entrepreneurs are resilient, and just like, I think hold tight and talk to fellow entrepreneurs and reach out to your mentors or your investors. And I think I'm really hopeful that this is gonna have a positive outlook. I think it's sad to see so many people losing jobs and their right. lives, but I think we have to get this learning from something bad and try to make something good out of the situation.
Yep, as you said, we have to survive to thrive. So it's all about thriving. Julia, yes. This was a real pleasure. So happy we were able to chat, and just excited to continue to build the relationship. So,
thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
It was a pleasure to be here.
Este fue otro programa de Aquí y Ahora, auspiciado por PAG.law, especialista en Venture Capital. Hasta pronto.